Hi, I'm Fara Sax with the Community Voice. 80 years after the Holocaust, less than 500,000 Jewish survivors are still alive. 70% of those will be gone within 10 years, meaning time is running out to hear the voices of the last generation who suffered through one of the worst atrocities in history. In my 6-part series dedicated to the subject and to its survivors, I've shared the stories of a handful of local South Florida survivors, as well as second and third generation offspring of Holocaust families. Each story matters. Each voice adds to our collective memory. Their strength and resilience shines brightly in their interviews. So let us remember together. Colette Feifer, affectionately known as Tinkerbell, born around April 1945, though her exact birth date is unknown because her birth records were destroyed. During the war, as a young child, her parents carried her in their arms on a harrowing journey from Russia to Poland. After the war, in 2005, she founded the Silent Victims of Crime, an organization devoted to helping children of incarcerated parents, guiding them towards making positive choices and becoming contributing members of society.
Rights because I have a birth certificate from Poland, but my parents were hiding during the Holocaust in Russia. And it was my parents and my one more couple that escaped the Holocaust because they were in Poland. There were only 200 survivors of millions. So my parents did the right thing, but when they escaped, they left the whole family behind. And they all got exterminated.
How old were you when this happened?
I was born in, we think, we're not 100% sure, in April of 1945. It could have been a few months earlier, it could have been later, but by the time we got to Poland, I guess it was April 3rd of 1945, but my parents walked from Russia to Poland with me in their arms. I was only a few months old. And there's no truth to the story. There's only messages, words from other family members. One other family member who thinks I was already a year old when we crossed. And so they took freight cars, illegally, obviously, on and off, and walked from Russia to Poland.
Allan J. was born in Krakow, Poland in 1935. During the war, from the ages of 7 to 9, he and his mother hid in his father's office closet. Mr. Hall's parents sent him and his toddler brother on a perilous journey alone to reach Palestine, known as modern-day Israel. Mr. Hall would later earn his law degree from the University of Florida and become a respected professor. He was recently inducted into the Hall of Fame of his alma mater, Miami Beach High.
Anti-Semitism today is bubbling up through the internet from the common people. So it's quite different, although I don't minimize the risk. I understand the difference of it, but I think what we have not been very good at is figuring out how to counteract the anti-Semitism effectively. In my opinion, and I'm too old, I don't understand the various media, but I would go into wherever there's an anti-Semitic word, I would go with a counter message so that there are always counter messages. And I don't claim to be knowledgeable, not at all. But I think we have to fight it much more vigorously than we're doing it now. Because it will spread. There's no question about it. And it baffles me why it has continued for 2,000 years. And there seems to be for a moment I thought that it was going to abate. But I don't see any evidence of that.
Any parting messages?
Yes. What you have heard is a man, an old man, who has spent years in psychotherapy and who's not ashamed of it at all. And there are so many other people that have a need for help. And I think, please don't worry about the stigma. There is no stigma. Get yourself well. With the help of psychotherapy, I've been successful in building a family. I've been successful in getting an education. I've been successful in building a career. I've been successful in many ways.
Joseph Alexander, born in Poland, is 102 years old. Mr. Alexander survived 12 Nazi concentration camps and even came face to face with Dr. Joseph Mengele.
Few survivors left, so we have to tell our story. Because 6 million and 1.5 million children were murdered by the Nazis. So we have to talk for them. They can't talk. So let the people know what happened to prevent another Holocaust. Because I talked to public schools, the middle school and the high school students. I was told that 70% of those kids never heard about the Holocaust. So I talked to them.
Dr. Miriam Klein Kassenoff fled Kosice, Slovakia, as a young child in 1941 in open hiding and was on the run with her parents and infant brother. Dr. Kassenoff is a dedicated Holocaust educator, the founding director of the Teacher Institute on Holocaust Studies at the University of Miami School of Education.
We were having a very peaceful, quiet family home. My mother, my father, myself. And
your brother wasn't born yet?
He was not. Yes, he was. He had been born. He was just a few months old. And the Nazi police, Hungarian police, broke in and grabbed my father by his elbows and dragged him out. And my mother screamed, and she hid me and my baby brother in the closet. And when I came out, I said, in Hungarian, that's the language I spoke then, "Where's Daddy?" And she said, "They took him away, they took him away, they took him to a camp." Why? Because we're Jewish. And as I say today to my student audiences and my teacher audiences, because everybody wants to know about anti-Semitism, for me, my story is more about the beginnings and the rise of anti-Semitism for me, because it's been around a long time. But for me, that was my first knowledge that there must be something terrible about being a Jew. I always thought it was a beautiful thing. You were 4 years old or 5 years old. What do you remember? So I'm very, very honest. I'm very fortunate to be, I think, one of the few child survivors who also went on to become a public school teacher and got my doctorate to study the Holocaust, because I'm an English teacher by profession, not a history teacher. And in my research that led me to discover my own past for my doctorate, I went to Yad Vashem. I studied there in Israel, the ghetto fighters' house in Israel. And what I was able to put together were original documents of my family story through the Hayas Hebrew Immigration Aid Society, which is based in New York, and the YIVO research. And what I was able to do was, when I got those papers, it was, like a huge pile. And that was 25 years ago, and I was not a scholar. I didn't know what to do with these papers. So I remember spreading them all out in the living room floor and then putting them in chronological order by date and got myself a narrative. So what I was able to do, my parents were living at that time, was I understood the journey, I understood the narrative, but to fill in the holes, I said to my parents at the time, my father was a rabbi in Miami Beach, I said, this is what I remember. Is this true? And this is what I don't remember. Can you fill that in?
How fortunate.
So I was lucky enough to have my parents corroborate. Yes, we did lose Daddy one night on a train. He went on the wrong train. I went on the wrong train, said my mother. And yes, you did hear me screaming, Moritz, Moritz, where are you? Where are you? And yes, you do remember reuniting. And yes, you do remember that we were in a hotel. And yes, you do remember that we finally arrived in Lisbon, Portugal, and I left you to take care of the baby while we went and got papers. So, though, if you ask anyone if they can remember a traumatic event when they were 5 years old, they'll say, yeah, it's a flash of memory. It's there.
Jack Waksal was born on September 15, 1924. During the war, he was taken to labor camps, lived in ghettos, and later in the war, hid in the forest for many months.
And they took out a guy in front of me. And later they took my father. And I know right away that he's gonna be killed. I said to the German, take me for this guy. When I told him, he picked me up here like this, pulled me out, and pushed my father back. I was happy. Did I know that I'm going to be killed? Probably, yes. I didn't care. And when they come out with over 50-some people in the beginning, it was already after 4 o'clock in November, and they said, we're going to go to the forest. It was not far away from the forest where they make the grave. And they put us in, you have to walk single-wise, one underneath the other. And when we come to the grave, told us to kneel down. When we kneel down, the officer was on the one side and the left, and the rest of them, the SS, Ukraine, was working with the Germans. They was with the guns. And they said, they asked the officer, when we going to start shooting? He said, I'm going to show you how to do it. When I go after my pistol, I'm going to show you how to do it. And I said to the guy in the front, I was the second in the line. I said, if he's going to go for the gun, before he go, I talked to him in Polish. And I said, get up and let's fight. And that's when he started to go after the gun, we did it. And it was close to the grave, and we was fighting. We fell in the grave, all the three of us, with the German, and he started to holler in German, not shooting. If not, they would kill him too.
The 2 and 3 generation of Holocaust survivors, Hagit Pfefferman, Ralph Berger, Jennifer Weisfish, share their parents' and grandparents' story of survival, overcoming being experimented on by Dr. Joseph Mengele, to being in multiple concentration camps, to living in the forest with the Belinsky Brigade, inspiring the movie Defiance. Thank you.
I'm going to start with Rose, my grandmother, and Boris was my grandfather. They were survivors, and when I was about in 2nd grade, very young, they took me for a walk outside with my grandfather's encouragement. He started telling me bits and pieces about their experience during the Holocaust. And my grandmother went through several camps and was experimented on by Dr. Mengele. My grandfather also, they were both in ghettos, and my grandfather helped smuggle people out into the Soviet side. So I was getting these drips and drabs, but by the time I was in middle school, I asked if I could just sit them down and tape the story, because it was just so much for me to process being so young. And from that time, when they saw how interested I was in it, they really told me everything. And especially my grandmother, who did not talk to anyone else about it. She, throughout my life, told me.
My dad was a rabbinical student when Hitler first invaded Poland and Belarus. He was captured twice by the Nazis and escaped. After the second escape, he wandered on his own for a year, often being hidden by righteous Gentiles. In that year, 130 of his relatives were murdered. And he realized, he always had very good instincts. He realized that his only chance of survival was to be with other Jews. So he attached himself to a slave labor gang and went into the ghetto. At a certain point, he realized there's going to be a massacre. He was right. And he and others, 6 other men, escaped. And this was after being told that the Belsky brothers were forming a Jewish partisan unit. Partisans, resistance fighters. And he was one of the original members and the organizers. Another 8 escaped shortly thereafter. Those 15 men elected Tuvia Belsky to be the commander, and they rescued other Jews, and they fought the Nazis, often with Soviet detachments. My mom came from a very religious family, but she was very progressive. She wrote prose and poetry. She was in community theater. She belonged to 2 different Zionist groups. The British mandate prevented her from making Aliyah to Israel at the time.
Oh, interesting.
So she obtained papers to go to South Africa. 3 of her aunts had already emigrated there. But the Nazis closed that door. The world that my parents lived in was destroyed. A massacre took place in what was called the Novigrad Ghetto, not terribly far from the Lodz Ghetto, on August 7th, 1942, 10 years to the day before I was born. 4,000 Jews were murdered, and most of my mother's family. My mother and her sister-in-law, Judy Gulkovich, survived the massacre by hiding in a cesspool for 6 days without food or water. They were rescued by my uncle, Ben-Zion Gulkovich, and they escaped, and they joined the Belsky Brigade.
So my grandmother, who I called Bubby, which in the Jewish language just means grandmother, was a lady that was full of life. Any room that she walked into, everybody, she had everyone's attention. She had this crown of blonde hair and blue eyes, which I always tell the students was exactly what the Nazis called the Aryan race. And she was just always making a joke out of something. She was a very stern and serious lady. But I think, like most Jews, we always take the turmoil and the horrible things that we've endured, and we make humor out of it because that's how we move forward. So my grandfather and her were both from Hungary. They both survived. I did not know my grandfather's story. And I'd like to say that my grandmother's story found me, because she would go to schools and my father would tell her story on her behalf, and she would be there. She would answer the questions that the students had. But he would really tell the story. And one day they came to my school and I got to hear it for the first time.
So in other words, they never told it to you
Never told it to me personally.
But
never one-on-one. I heard it with 250 other kids my age. And afterwards, all my friends were so intrigued, and because she really was full of life and a character. And when she went to these schools, she really impacted these students. They had relationships with her. They wrote letters to her, and they hugged her and they cried with her. And so it really was incredible that she went from living a normal teenage girl life in Hungary, never in a million years thought she would ever leave Hungary, and in 1 month's time was deported to Auschwitz. I think who we impact the most, who we speak to the most, are the public schools, and mostly non-Jewish students. And when they hear this story, we tell them, this is the Holocaust, this happened to the Jews, but this is not just about the Jews, it is about humanity. This is one human story, and what they endured and what they went through. This did not start with the gas chambers, it started with words. We talk to the students about their actions, their words. They impact their lives and the lives of the people around them. And we hope that when they hear these stories, they gain empathy. These stories, that they sit with them forever, just as they've impacted our lives. We hope that it impacts their lives, and that they, are good citizens and good, friends to each other. And we talk about bullying and how these stories, we have all been trained how to connect these stories with students today and how it really should resonate with them.